بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين، سيما الإمام المبين والكهف الحصين وغياث المضطر المستكين، مولانا وسيدنا وولي أمرنا الحجة ابن الحسن، فداه أرواح العالمين. السلام على الشفاه الذابلات. Peace be upon the parched lips. السلام على الرؤوس المشالات. Salam be upon the severed heads that were placed on long spears. Assalamu ala al-khadd al-tarib. Salam be upon the cheek that was covered with dust. Assalamu ala al-badan al-salib. Salam be upon the body that was left without a shroud. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please recite aloud salawat. If the brothers can move to the front a little bit, please recite a second loud salawat in the honor of Lady Fatima alayha salam. And in the love and honor of her beloved son Imam al-Hussein, recite a third louder salawat. The religious incentives is the title of tonight's lecture. And it pertains to one of the features of this religion. Religious people have an advantage over the religiousless, or people that don't have a religion. Because there is this heated debate between theists and atheists regarding the source of our moral system. We believe that our moral system should be heavily influenced by religion and by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they say that religion shouldn't dictate on us as how to behave. Religion shouldn't impose a moral system on humans. We can figure out what to do and what's right and what's wrong. We can navigate our way in life. And what they do is they end up adopting a moral system that is contextual. Nothing is fixed according to atheists. Yes, they believe in abstract notions, but at the end of the day, what they do is they believe in contextual morality. They say that societies change. One day, in this society, women were covered up, wore modest clothes. But now, wearing modest clothes is frowned upon. So societies change, and we change as societies evolve. One day, even in the most liberal Western societies, homosexuality was frowned upon, without a doubt. But nowadays, things are changing. And they refuse to yield to an authority. They refuse to yield to an external factor from outside the society. But what they end up doing is they end up yielding to external factors as well, because this change is not being brought about organically. Societies are not changing spontaneously. The change is coming from an outside source. Hollywood is, for example, one of the sources of the moral system of today's culture. There is embedded subtle messages even in cartoons that our children watch to normalize, for example, homosexuality. Although atheists always nag and complain about indoctrinating, they say theists, they indoctrinate their children about religion and about God. You should wait for them to grow up and give them the option to choose between religion or being religious. But what they do is they indoctrinate our children. Who stands behind this change? Who puts these subtle messages in our movies and the movies that we watch, in our syllabus? Who stands behind it? Are people unknown to us. So they yield to their authority and they refuse to yield to the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created us, and He is well aware of our deficiencies and our needs. So in tonight's lecture, I would like to shed light and put forth a number of examples of how religion can create incentives for people that adhere to the religion and allow them and enable them to carry out certain deeds that they wouldn't carry out if it wasn't for these incentives. And that's one of the most important features of religion. The first example. Allow me to start with an introduction. The Quran is alive. The Quran is a book of facts. Al-Qur'anu hayy wa ayatuhu hayyah. The hadith says the Quran is alive. The verses of the Quran are alive. You can never put an expiry date on the Quran because the Quran will remain relevant. It was relevant back then, it still is relevant, and it will stay relevant. Just like Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And these two come together. Imam al-Hussein doesn't have an expiry date. Imam al-Hussein was relevant, is relevant, will stay relevant. The Quran is a book of facts. The Quran reveals to us humans a universal law that governs the universe. If we become aware of this law and adopt this law, this will result in us changing the way we live in this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in one verse, إِنْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. Humans by nature are very selfish. We think that we are the center of the universe. Everything should rotate around us. We do everything for our own benefit. The Quran comes and He gives us a different perspective of the world and how there are certain laws that govern the universe. And we could use our selfishness, it's a weakness that we have, and turn it into a strength. The Quran says that if you do good, you will reap the benefit of your good deeds. In أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم. There was a man, and this story is documented. I have the reference, the names and everything. There was a man sitting on a chair on a beach in a European country. He saw someone while he was swimming, he was about to drown. So he puts his life on the line and goes into the water and saves that man. 40 years later, a man was sitting on a chair in another country, overlooking the beach. He saw someone drowning, so he goes to save him. When he saves him, he comes out, he realizes that the man that he saved was was his savior 40 years ago. So what happened was, he, by saving that man 40 years ago, saved himself. Now this system that is in place is so powerful and so perfect that everything that happens to us is because of something that we've done in the past. We might not be able to see the link, but there is close correlation and relation between the good deeds that we do and the benefits that we reap in the future. تحننوا على أيتام الناس يتحننوا على أيتامكم. Be compassionate towards people's orphans. We don't control this dunya, but one day when either you or your children, if they end up having orphans after they die, people will be compassionate towards your orphans because you were compassionate to people's orphans. And the amount of good deeds that you do, the more you give, the more you reap. And it's proportionate to how much you give. If you choose to be only for yourself, dedicate your life, your wealth, your health, entirely for yourself and your family, you will end up reaping nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let me give you a few examples of how this law functions. Zakatul jahi badluh. You have a social status. You have a good credit in the society. Someone comes and tells you that I need your help. For example, I need you to come and to ask for a loan from someone. People don't know me. And you know that that person will return the loan. You'll have to use your status. You'll have to use the respect that you have in the society. The hadith says that if you use your status and go and speak to that person to give that loan to that man, zakatul jahi badluh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase your respect in the society, will elevate your status in the society. Or the hadith says, "Man sa'a fi hajati akhihi al-mu'min." Someone comes and he tells you, I need your help. Whether it's financial or otherwise, any sort of help. If you choose not to help him, nothing's going to happen. But if you choose to help that person, كَانَ اللَّهُ وَرَاءَ حَوَائِجِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is waiting for you to take action. If you choose to help that person, Allah Himself says that I will fulfill his wishes. I will answer his prayers. I will give him what he wants. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to do so, He's in charge of everything. He's in charge of the world. So this is a great incentive. When you hear that by helping someone, God is going to help you, then you'll be keen to help people. You'll look for these opportunities to help people. If someone needs your intervention, your intercession, to use your respect in the society, don't say no. Go use it. And I've seen that firsthand. I've got firsthand experience of two people that are respected in the society. One uses that status to help other people, and the other doesn't. The other doesn't. He thinks that he should preserve his status by not intervening in anything, by not asking anyone for any help, even if it's not for himself. And I've seen that the status of the man that uses the respect that he has in the society is much higher, much more elevated than that person that doesn't use his status to help other people. وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. The verse says, by adopting this view, brothers and sisters, this will change the way we deal with other people. وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. But if you do evil, this evil that you did will come and bite you in no time. In no time, what you did will come, you'll have to reap the consequence. Like the story of that guy who was a bad influence on his friend. He taught him to do drugs. 2 years later, they were separated from each other. That person, that friend who started doing drugs because of his friend, he grew up, had children, and his children picked that habit from their father. The children of the first guy mingled with the children of that guy, and they ended up becoming drug abusers because of that man's influence. It will come back and bite you. وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says in one beautiful hadith, he says, I've never done any good to anyone in my life, and no one has ever done any harm to me. They said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you've dedicated your entire life to helping others. Sometimes he would stand in the middle of the street under the sun of Kufa. Warm weather in Najaf in Kufa reaches 50 degrees Celsius. He would stand there alone without any bodyguards. People would look at him and say, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why are you standing here? He says, Alla talibu haja. There might be a person in need of help. So I'm just waiting in case someone passes by and he needs my help. I'll go and help him. Although he was the emperor, although he was the ruler. So he says that I've never helped anyone. I've never done good to anyone. وَلَا أَسَاءَ إِلَيَّ أَحَدٍ. And no one has ever done any harm to me. He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you've been oppressed. The majority of people in your nation have oppressed you. The Imam has a hadith, has a saying. He says, usually the nations, they complain about the mistreatment of the rulers. But I complain from the mistreatment of the nation. تشتكي الأمم ظلم رعاتها وأصبحت أشكو ظلم رعيتي. How could you say that? How could you make that statement that you've never done good to anyone? He recited this verse. إن أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها. If you do evil, it will come back in and bite you. Let me give you a few examples that are mentioned in the hadith. The hadith says, لا تغتب فتغتب. If you backbite, people will backbite you. This is a law. Backbiting, people enjoy backbiting. Why? Because it conceals their own deficiencies. They enjoy talking about other people's deficiencies. They themselves are filled with deficiencies from head to toe. This is why they enjoy talking about people's bad traits behind their backs. Now, these people are usually very sensitive when it comes to backbiting. If you tell them that it's haram, don't do it, they wouldn't refrain. And religion is not about do's and don'ts. There has to be incentives. There has to be a driving force. So the hadith says, لا تغتب فتغتب. People will talk against you behind your back. And for some people, this is a red line. I wouldn't talk against people so that people wouldn't talk against me behind my back. Or there is another hadith, very beautiful, that says that if someone talked against another person in your presence, and you have the chance to defend that person, أعقل الناس أعذرهم للناس. The wisest amongst you is the one that excuses the people for their deficiencies. Maybe his circumstances, impose that on him. Maybe he didn't do it willingly. Maybe he didn't do it consciously. Try to find an excuse. The hadith says, and you have the opportunity, the chance to defend that person. The hadith says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect that person, the defender. Someone is backbiting, you defend that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect that person from 1,000 types of miseries. أغلق الله عليه ألف باب من البلاء. After I recited the hadith, after I read the hadith, every time someone backbites in my presence, I see it as an opportunity. I rise and say, maybe it's that, maybe it's this. We don't know what his circumstances were. Defend that person. See, without these incentives, why would I care? It's enjoyable. Let me hear about other people's mishaps. Let me just enjoy listening to people backbiting each other. But the hadith says that if you listen to people backbiting, then you're taking part in backbiting as well, because you're enabling that person to backbite. وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. Another example. The hadith says, مَنْ زَنَى زُنِيَ بِأَهْلِهِ. If a person commits adultery, it's an urge, it's a desire. You might say, look, this is haram, don't do it, but that's not enough. The hadith says that anyone that violates the sanctity of a woman, of a family, because that woman that you committed adultery with, God forbid, has a mother, has a father, and in 99.9% of the cases, their parents are not okay with you committing adultery with their daughter, right? So the hadith says that by violating their sanctity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, even if they enabled themselves, one day will come when your sanctity will be violated. Someone will commit adultery with your sister, with your daughter. And for the majority of people, this is ugly. This is a red line. Even if I allow myself to commit this grave sin, but I wouldn't allow anyone to commit the sin with my daughter or with my sister. And you see people complaining about their daughters or their children going astray. This could be a consequence of what you did. You're reaping what you sowed. You're reaping what you sowed. Or the hadith even says, من نظر إلى أعجاز الناس, if you look lustfully at other women, people will look lustfully at your woman, at your sister, at your daughter. This is ugly. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the ghira. We're overprotective when it comes to our women folk. When it comes to our daughters, when it comes to our sisters, when it comes to our mothers, we're overprotective. Even a person that's careless comes in an assembly in front of everyone holding the hand of his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is wearing immodest clothes. But if someone makes a smart comment, flirts with that woman, that man becomes aggressive, even if he's careless. But this is a red line that people shouldn't cross when it comes to our sanctity. So the hadith says that by looking at women lustfully, other people will look at your woman lustfully. That's why the hadith says, مَا زَنَا غَيُورٌ قَطْ. A person who's got ghira over his own woman, over his own daughters and sisters, wouldn't commit adultery. Because if he's careless with respect to others people's a'rad, others people's women, then this is going to come and bite him sooner or later. Sooner or later. Another example of these incentives. We squander. We throw away food. We waste. Governments usually spend millions of dollars to raise awareness to tell people not to do that. One hadith is enough to change the way you look at food, you look at the ni'am of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hadith says that if you collect the food that falls on the table or on the cloth that you eat on, if you collect the food, one single rice, you collect that food, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you from poverty. You'll never become poor. Not only you, but 7 generations of your descendants will all be protected from poverty. Because the hadith says, اتقوا مجاورة النعم. Be careful about God's blessings. If you squander, they will run away from you, and for good. Never come back. Never come back. After reading this hadith, I was a child. But every time, and I have a friend who is in charge usually of all the food that falls on the table, on the cloth. He collects all the food because he's greedy. He doesn't want to become poor. Neither does he want this to be for his children. He collects all the food. اتقوا مجاورة النعم فإنها وحشية قلما نأت عن قوم أن عادت إليهم. There was an old man who was admonishing his children. He was telling them that today I sit with you and I tell you about the old days, how we were poor, nothing was available, people didn't have money, didn't have food. But I dread the day that will come that you will sit and tell your children about the good old days when everything was available, you had food, you had fruits, you had everything that you wanted. But this will be something of the past. So be careful, don't squander. Don't throw food in the recycle bin when you can still eat it. Another incentive. The hadith says that you should be kind to your parents. That's not enough. That's not enough. No matter how much I talk about the thawab or the rewards or what will happen in paradise, that's not sufficient. But the hadith says unequivocally, the way you treat your parents, your children will treat you. Once a sister came up to me and she said that my mother, she keeps interfering in my life and she's not that wise. I said to her that even if your mother is at fault, you should treat her the way you want your daughter to treat you when you misunderstand her. Because the societies are, evolving, they're changing, so there is a big chance that you won't understand your children and their needs. So how do you want your children to treat you when they don't understand you? You should treat your parents the same way. Another incentive. Now, no matter how much we talk about women's modesty and hijab and chastity, the pressure of the society is overwhelming. Peer pressure, the expectation of the society, especially that women are judged by their appearance. So if they're not attractive enough, people wouldn't look at them, right? But when you add an incentive, that will change everything. The hadith says, إن فاطمة أحصنت فرجها فحرم الله ذريتها على النار. If you're modest, if you practice chastity, this will be reflected on your children. Do you want to have children that behave well, that are religious, that are mu'min, that people look up to, that people always bring as an example of a good person? That's something every mother wants. That's something every woman wants. There is a strong correlation between the chastity of a woman and the religious well-being of her children. The hadith even says that you should even have a pure mind, not fantasize in a way that would undermine your chastity. To that extent, Fatima al-Zahra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed her with pure children because of her chastity. The same thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Maryam ibn Imran, التي أحصنت فرجها, after protecting her chastity, فنفخنا. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her Jesus. So, if you become chaste, if you protect your chastity, if you purify even your mind, your tongue, the way you dress, the way you behave, in exchange, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you wonderful children. And that's a great incentive. That's the price you're paying, but in exchange, you're getting something valuable. I still have 10 minutes time, so I'll mention another example. The society is filled with hate. People hold grudge for eternity. If someone wrongs you, you'll keep hating that person until you die. But look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala engineers this. You could pray for yourself. Ya Ilahi, increase my sustenance. Ya Ilahi, I want health. Ya Ilahi, I want wealth. Ya Ilahi, I want a spouse. I want a car. This dua may or may not be answered, depending on many factors. But the hadith says that if you do something, then the dua will be guaranteed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer that dua. If you ask another mu'min, or if another man prays for you, if you pray for another person, you'll get three things. Number one, the hadith says that there is an angel waiting for you to do dua for someone, for your friend, for your brother. This angel will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you double what you asked for your brother or sister. For example, you said, Ya Ilahi, give my brother a car. or $10,000, that angel will say, give him double the amount that he asked for his brother. The other hadith says that if you do dua for your brothers, Allah will increase your sustenance. مُدِرْ لِلرِّزْقِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving guarantees that the dua is answered when you do dua for someone else. This way you'll be keen to do dua for everyone. Include them in your prayers every day, every night, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer your prayer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept your dua and will grant them what you asked for them and will grant you double. And in this way, you could rid yourself from the hate that you have in your heart. Because we usually don't have good relationship with people that are, our peers. We usually envy them. But when you start doing dua for everyone, you start to like them. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows love in our hearts for other people. مُدِرْ لِلرِّزْقِ وَمُسْتَجَابْ لِلدُّعَاءِ. I'll conclude my speech with mentioning this hadith. The hadith says that if you visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala, what's the incentive? The incentive is كان ممن تدعو له فاطمة. If you visit Hussein, who's going to pray for you? They say that if your father prays for you, his prayers is accepted, is answered. Your father, he raised you. If your mother prays for you, it's accepted. Imagine if Fatima al-Zahra prays for you. She's the one asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make you live a prosperous life. The dua of Fatima will never be rejected. Why? Because Imam al-Hussein was very dear to Fatima. When Imam al-Hussein was born, Rasulullah comes to Fatima al-Zahra. And he says to her that Gabriel told me that your son will be killed on the day of Ashura. He'll be butchered. He'll be beheaded. Imagine Fatima al-Zahra, who just gave birth to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. She is informed of the news that he's going to be butchered. He's going to be beheaded. Hussein, the son of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Is this the reward of the ummah to the Prophet? Is this how you respond to the verse in the Quran that I ask you for no reward but to have love and affection for my family? So Fatima says, I don't want him. If he's going to grow up and then get killed in the way you mentioned, I don't want him. Prophet says to her, oh Fatima, the reason why he needs to be killed is to salvage the ummah, to save the nation. بذل مهجته فيك لينقذ عبادك من الضلالة وحيرة الجهالة. To save you, to save me, to save us, to save the nation. That's when Fatima al-Zahra accepted. Yani Fatima gave her consent. Fatima. Imam al-Hussein wasn't alone in the sacrifice that he made on the day of Ashura. The progeny of Rasulullah took part in that sacrifice. Fatima al-Zahra recites a poem. It's a hadith. She says, لَمْ أُمَرِّضْهُ قَتِيلًا. I did not raise him so that the nation kill him. لَا وَلَا كَانَ مَرِيضًا. And just moments before the dawn of the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein was intact. There was not even a bruise on his body. Why is it that hours later, ما غسلوه ولا لفوه في كفن? You did what you did. Why did you leave him lying on the sand dunes of Karbala without washing his body, washing off the blood covering his body? السلام على المغسل بكاسات الرماح. السلام على المغسل بدم الجراح. You know how the Imam was washed with the blood of his injuries. Why did you leave him without burial on the sand dunes of Karbala? Now that you killed him, just leave him. Why did you stomp over his body with horses? ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والعاقبة للمتقين.